2 bottles of Coca-Cola. So the central bank has essentially been a rogue bank that has engaged in quasi-fiscal activities, which have virtually taken over Treasury, taken over the Ministry of Finance, whose footprint and fingerprint has been about 35% of GDP. So the central bank itself has been generating 35%, yet its function is just that of a central bank, managing the exchange rate, managing the payment system. So when you have a situation which has been happening now, where broad money supply, what economists call M3, which is the money in circulation, including the notes and the coins, and the artificial money, the Ponzi scheme that John has been running. When you have that artificial money growing in a year from May 22 to May 2023 by 300%, you have a problem. And the problem essentially is that Mutuli Ngube did not understand the damaging effect, the cataleptic effect of the printing press. The printing press will bring you down, the printing press will embarrass you, the printing press will expose you, and the printing press has exposed both Mr. John Panonetsa Mangundla, my good friend, and Professor Mutuli Ngube.
How do they run the printing press, as you said, with impunity, without anyone stopping? As Parliament, should you not be doing these checks and balances and saying, look, let's stop it, or what is this money for?
So there are two things that are basic. You see, economics is logic. It's a logic. Economics, the economy is like a huge river. Adam Smith calls it the invisible hand. The market. So picture the Zambezi River. The Zambezi River flows into the Indian Ocean. It's so powerful. Let it flow. Your job as an executive, your job as a Minister of Finance is just to make sure that it is flowing and flowing well, that there are no diversions. So if Farai and his family divert a huge chunk, you say, Farai, you can't do that. Or if there are fields besides that river where the water is not getting, you say the water must go there. When you try to manage this huge flow, this market, this social market, it will hit you back. So the first mistake that they did was the failure to understand the basic rule of economics. In mathematics, 1 minus 2 equals minus 1. In economics, 1 minus 2, you can't spend what you have. And that's why my mantra, when I was Minister of Finance, I used to say, we eat what we kill. You must balance the books. Deficit financing, deficit economics is terrible. But of course, most economists will tell you, but every government runs a deficit. The American government runs a deficit. It's not so much the debt which is a problem. It's not so much the deficit which is a problem. It's how you monetize that deficit. How you monetize Chikwere. This is the problem in Zimbabwe. We monetize the deficit through creative means because we can't borrow from the World Bank. We have no access to international markets. So we now revert to printing of money. Or in some cases, actually stealing money, going to people's accounts and raiding foreign currency deposits, as we did in 2006. And so when John comes, there is $6 billion sitting in people's accounts, $6 billion, which was left by the government of national unit. But because they can't live within their means, they actually go and raid that money. They raid that money. So up 2013, you could actually go to an ATM and get $100,000. You could get whatever money you had, your money. But after 2014, there's a problem now. 2015, there's a problem until 2016. And I'll come to May 2016. The central bank raised people's money and gives an overdraft of $4 billion to the government. So when you go now, you can't get your cash because that money has been raided by the central bank. The Public Accounts Committee, which I chaired, did a report on the central bank and discovered that they had created a shortfall of at least 4 billion by this overdraft. They literally raided people's banks. How did they cover the deficit? This is where I revert to my creative means. Kukia. Yeah, Zvikwambo now. This is where Zvikwambo come in. What was Zvikwambo now? They created a fiat currency. They created a fiat currency, the bond note. So on the 4th of May 2016, they introduced the bond note. Why are they introducing the bond note? They have to cover this shortfall now. They have to cover this shortfall, but they can't tell the world, they can't tell Zimbabwe that we have stolen your money. They create the myth that the bond note is equal to the US dollar. But the bond note is not backed by anything. The bond note has no value. The bond note is a reflection of money that has actually been stolen from depositors. So by 2018, they've got the audacity of saying on the 1st of October 2018, through exchange directive RT 120 of 2018, that the exchange rate is now 1:1 with the bond note. In February 2019, they go the full Monty and enact SI 33 of 2019, which you and I discussed the last time I was here, which then said all debts now are now converted 1:1 to RTGS. It is a grand theft. So that's why we're in this situation, because they created the fiat money, bad money, a Ponzi scheme, because they'd failed to respect the basic rule of economics. You live within your means, you eat what you kill. So fiscal indiscipline has brought us to where we are. Lack of fiscal consolidation has brought us to where we are. I will talk about the other things, mismanagement of the exchange rate, mismanagement of inflation, but the primary thing is that you have got a government which can't live within its means, and that's why we're here.
Honorable Biti, if you were to be in the shoes of Professor Mthuli now, given the background you've given us, given knowing the challenges and the hardships that Zimbabweans are facing, what would you do?
I think as a matter of agency, I would dollarize, so repeal SI 33 of 2019, now incorporated as Act number 7 of 2019. Number 2, I would float the Zimbabwean dollar, so allow it to find its natural mark. So remove this fiction of interbank rate. Number 3, I would scrap the auction system, scrap it, completely. Number 4, scrap export surrender requirements, scratch export surrender requirements, but oblige exporters to bank 75% of their money in Zimbabwe with banks. That means that you increase forthwith supply of foreign currency in the market. Number 5, pay the civil servant in US dollar. Pay the civil servant in US dollar. Don't tell me we don't have the money. We've got the money. We can collect around $300-400 million a month. That's more than enough. Pay pensioners in US dollars. Number 6, restore savings. There are no savings in Zimbabwe. The rate of interest on savings is around 5%, and John Mangundla increased the lending rate to 160%. So how can you have a lending rate without a savings rate? So bring back the culture of savings. All developed countries, all successful countries, they must have savings which are at least 25% of GDP. China is now the world's second largest economy. Its a ratio of savings to GDP is about 50%. Encourage people to put money in banks. As I'm talking to you right now, you probably have close to $1 billion in people's trunks, in safe deposit box, at cabs, in people's pillows. So encourage savings, because when you have a stock of savings, it means people can borrow cheap money. Then deal with corruption. I was speaking in Parliament today about illicit financial flows. This economy is losing over $3 billion a year from illicit financial flows, either from mining, diamonds, lithium, or even from our animals. Trade in the ivory. Trade rhino horn is $29 billion a year, and Zimbabwe is one of the major sources of illegal ivory. 75,000 elephants are killed annually, and Zimbabwe has got a fair share of it. So we are losing a lot through illicit financial flows. So stop the bleeding, stop the corruption, and then of course the other things are basic. Let's deal with the debt. Zimbabwe must deal with its issue of sovereign debt. Zimbabwe must deal with gross capital formation. By gross capital formation, I'm referring to infrastructure. We've got a stretch of 100,000 kilometers worth of road in Zimbabwe. Less than 7% of it is paved. With great respect to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where the portable capital of sub-Saharan Africa, electricity, dams, and so forth. So there's a lot that needs to be done, and that's why the issue of leadership, which I've referred to, is so critical.
We'll come back to some of the issues you've touched on. The great debate on to dollarize or not dollarize. Different people have different opinions. I often hear people saying that no country in the world can develop without a currency of its own. So how do you expect us to develop?
We shouldn't be having that debate. We shouldn't be having that debate because the economy is dollarized. I said to Mutuli Ngube in Parliament the other day, show me whether you've got local currency anyway. So if I sent you Mkoma Farai, you probably have $2 in your packet. So the economy is already dollarized. The reason is very simple. Our own currency was caught in flagranto, was caught naked in 2008. The currency is a reflection of confidence. 60% of economics is confidence. So people of Zimbabwe lost confidence in their own currency. As a matter of fact, there is no country in the world which has involuntarily dollarized as we did in 2007, 2008. There's no country which has been able to re-dollarize. It does, except Panama in 1904. But under extremely different circumstances. But what you can do is you can introduce your currency parallel to the base currency, the US dollar, and allow that currency to find a resting place. Which is why if you go to East Africa, if you go into a bank in Kenya or Uganda or Rwanda or Tanzania, they'll ask you, Farai, do you want your money in Kenyan shillings, Ugandan shillings, or Tanzanian shillings, or US dollar? Because the exchange rate has been stable at 1:6,000 for a long time. So when you dollarize, it's impossible to de-dollarize. However, it's impossible to introduce a stable currency under the right circumstances. Number one, you must deal with the integrity of your central bank. We have a thoroughly compromised, a thoroughly extractive, rogue central bank. In my respectful submission, we need to shut it and replace it with a currency board. Replace with the currency board. So you limit its powers. Number two, the government itself must have discipline. So fiscal discipline is important, because if you don't have fiscal discipline, you have these distortions. Number three, increase the efficiency in your economy. Yeah. We are now entering the digital age. Digital age, and the 5 Ds that will be critical. That will take this country, forward. One of them is the digitalization of our economy. The other one is the decarbonization of this economy. So digitalization is key. Modernizing this economy is key. The third D is data. We have to be a data-driven society. It's key. Data is key. The next D is, of course, development. We need to develop. So those Ds are important.
You talk about digitalization there. Amongst, again, the measures that have been proffered, that have been brought forward, most recently is this digitally backed gold token, the issue of gold coins and things like that. As an oversight committee in Parliament, when you see these measures being done, are they being done the right way from a legal point of view? And also, what are your thoughts on some of those measures? Some people have said the gold token, the digital backed gold token, is the way to go. Digital, as you've quite rightly said, and it's backed by gold. So what better form of value would you want than that?
So the digital coin is the digitalization of the gold coin. So let's start with gold coins. We are totally against the minting of gold coins for 3 reasons. Number 1, we have a currency that has been butchered by other currencies. It's the weakest currency in sub-Saharan Africa. And part of the reason is that it is not backed by any reserve. We don't have any foreign currency reserves. What they had is actually what I left, which is $300 million. I doubt whether they still have, that. So, in a situation where you don't have reserves, use your gold as reserves. Use your gold as a reserve to back your currency. Because you and I know that at the center of this crisis is a weak exchange rate, which therefore then generates inflation. So we've got the twin evils of inflation and exchange rate, collapse. So you can mitigate that by building reserves that will strengthen your thing. Secondly, the gold coin is nothing but arbitrage. A few months ago, they sold gold coins worth about 18 billion. 18 billion. When you did the maths now, they sold gold coins for $18 billion, where they'd bought the gold for $30 billion. So they're subsidizing the market. And why are they subsidizing the market? Because the gold coin is essentially become an instrument of arbitrage, available to a few. And if you look at what money is being used to purchase the gold coin, 95% of all gold coins have been bought by RTGS. But which RTGS is losing value by the day. Third, you are encouraging money laundering. You saw the gold mafia. If you bring cash and try to get cash out of Zimbabwe, it's extremely difficult. You can't bring $100 million out of Zimbabwe. They'll follow you. They'll track you. You have to bank it somewhere, and wherever you're going to bank it, that bank will be in trouble with the SWIFT system. So what they've now allowed is a situation where someone launders money into Zimbabwe, dry cleans it, and launders it through gold. So you bring dirty money, 100 million, purchase gold coins of 100 million, and get gold coins with a certificate issued by the... So it's a wise thing, which is why all policymakers, the African Development Bank, the IMF, has said to the government, you can't... It's not wise to mint your gold coins. So
the government says to them, you are armchair critics. To those IMFs, you are sitting there in Washington, you are not experiencing what's on the ground.
Economics together with the prostitution, they are the oldest professions in the world. Because once you start eating and producing, it's economics. You understand? So you are not reinventing anywhere. And Zimbabwe can't keep on reinventing insanity. One of the insanities that they've invented is this creature called blended inflation. What animal is that? You and I know that inflation is the measurement of the price of goods. So you go into a shop, you measure bread on the 1st of May, the price of bread on the 1st of May 2023. It's $2,000. You go to the end of May, 2 days ago, it's now 6,000. That's where it is now. Yeah. It's now 6,000 because it's tracking the dollar. The cost of bread is actually $1. But it's going up because the exchange rate is... so when you calculate inflation, we started off with 2,000, we are now on 6,000, so 4,000. We multiply 4,000 over 100, we get our rate of inflation. One price. Now, the minister introduces a statutory instrument that now blends the US dollar and it doesn't. He's a professor of economics, but on this evidence, the universities which gave him professorship will withdraw the professorship. So, coming back to my point, we can't be known for notoriety, for inventing madness, for patenting a madness, for putting a trademark on madness. Unfortunately, that is what my good friends, Mr. John Banoneza Mangundla and Professor Mthuli Ncube, are putting Zimbabwe.
Let's take some contributions that are coming through from our listeners. Get in touch with us on our WhatsApp number 0731 168 045. Send us a WhatsApp message 0731 168 045. Good evening. Thanks for bringing Honorable Biti. His contributions in Parliament are incisive, surgical analysis, and intelligent discourse. Thank you so much. Chikwenda gets in touch and says, Honorable Biti is full of zeal and wisdom when it comes to economic issues. Initially, we have a political problem. No one has confidence in the government. There is a lot of uncertainty. Those in charge seem to be more confused than the people we need to have, more confused than... seem to have lost that. Dollarization is the only solution. We cannot save when we do not have trust and confidence in the banking system. So we cannot, going back to that issue of savings and confidence that you spoke about. Someone asks, are the nostro balances backed by anything? Honorable Mthuli should just introduce a fully dollarized economy. My little knowledge is when whites were in colonial Zimbabwe, they had sanctions but did not change currency. Instead, they protected everybody, industries, banks, and insurance, and our government has not done that. For example, investment, we are all now destitute. That's from Maduna getting in touch. Listener contributions, keep them coming through 0731 168 045. Would love to hear from you, and you can tell us what your thoughts are on what's happening here. I could listen to Honorable Biti speak all day. He makes perfect sense, and madness is what our government has chosen instead. So, Honorable Biti, as you quite rightly, from the listener contributions and from what you are saying, when you interface or interact with your friends, as you call them, but also your counterparts in Parliament, Honorable Mthuli Ncube, Manguchka, amongst all others, and you tell them these things that you are saying, why do you think they're not being taken on board?
Well, look, a day before Minister Mthuli Ncube assumed office, he addressed a conference at Chatham House in London. And he was interviewed by a Zimbabwean journalist. What are you going to do? And the clip is available on social media. He said, I'm going to scrap the bond note because the bond note is bad money. And when you, Gresham's law, when you put and juxtapose bad money with good money, bad money chases good money. But the following day, he reverses that. He keeps the bond note. So when you talk to Mthuli in private, he knows all those things. There's nothing that I've spoken here which he doesn't know. But his problem is that he lacks the moral probity, the moral courage to actually say to his bosses, this can't work, this will work. And on the contrary, he has actually joined the bandwagon. He's actually become part of the problem. And with him, and this is my major point of departure between him and Chinamasa. Chinamasa is a lawyer like myself. He's not an economist, but Chinamasa ran the economy better than Mthuli Ncube. But trust me, Chinamasa was bad, but he ran it better than Mthuli. Because Chinamasa had the decency of knowing rules, knowing that there is elasticity. Mthuli Ncube has no elasticity at all. There's no elasticity at all. Just look at two things. The two financial adjustment bills that he has brought before Parliament. In 2020, he brought a financial adjustment a bill of $10.7 billion US, which the government had spent without approval of Parliament. Our budget is $4 billion. Over and above that, 10.7 billion was brought. 2021, he brought another financial adjustment bill, this time of 103 billion Zimbabwean dollars. So, in short, Mutuli Ngube lacks moral stamina, moral fabric. If you are a finance minister who doesn't have in your lexicon, in your dictionary, the word no, then you have a problem. Then you have a problem, because when you sit in that office, you face a trilemma, triple challenge. The challenge of huge demand, huge expectations, and low fiscal space. So even if they ask you, is your name Farai, you must say no first. Then you say, okay, yes, it's Farai. He lacks that. He flows with the wind. And if you flow with the wind, if you are not honest enough, you can't run this economy.
Listeners getting in touch. Sharkmanship says, I agree with Honorable Biti on most of his submissions except for dollarization. It's not a good idea considering that our economy is highly informal. Where will the government get the dollar to pay its workers? We should not have used the dollar from the onset in 2009. Ukaraidzisa chembere muto wegwaya mangwana inofuma yakafira mudziwa. US dollar is bad news to our economy. Someone else here was asking, I want to just go to this one because it's quite an interesting one, saying, Honorable Biti, you seem to be talking sense. If you were offered a job by the current government, would you take the offer? That's from Peter in Rugari.
So let me deal with the first question. The economy is already dollarized. So the argument on dollarization is trying to shut the door where the cattle is run.
Yeah.
The central government itself, in its monetary policy statement of January, accepts that the currency in use, 78%, is the US dollar. So people are already using the US dollar. Where are the sources of the US dollar? The diaspora is contributing $2 billion that is coming into this country. That's a source of the US dollar. Overseas development assistance is around $1 billion. Then remember, companies are exporting. Our exports are around 11 billion US dollars. That's a lot of money. That is going into the system again. So the problem is not the use of the US dollar. The problem is the infrastructure around the use of the US dollar. When you try to force people to use a currency that is valueless, and then they are forced to find refuge in a currency that has got value. So three things have gone up in value in the last 6 months. You can't buy a house in Zimbabwe because the cost of real estate has shot up exponentially. Yep. Why? People are hedging value in real estate. The stock exchange in the last 2 months has gone up by 400%. The values of stock of the stock market. Why? Because people again are hedging value. Then of course the US dollar. So the economy can afford to use US dollar as an interim short-term measure to achieve macroeconomic stability. In the long term, I agree with him. It's not sustainable to use the US dollar. The US dollar is an expensive currency, so it makes our exports more expensive and uncompetitive. So the long-term solution, in my respectful submission, is that Zimbabwe should push the rest of South SADC countries to actually, we already have a customs union. So let's transform this customs union. Let's transform SADC into a monetary union. So we have one currency, which will probably be the rand by another name, just like the euro is the Deutschmark by another name. That's the British wouldn't want me to hear me saying this. That's why they voted for Brexit 3 years ago. But it's another debate. So once we have a regional currency, it will be cheap. And by the way it's coming, the ultimate conclusion of the African Free Trade Area, ACTF, is ultimately one African currency. So you literally have one currency in West Africa, you literally have one currency in East Africa, the shilling. You must also have Chisadik currency, Muno. It's coming because the RECs are moving towards consolidation, the RECs are moving towards integration. So one day soon, the dream of W. Du Bois, of Patrice Lumumba, of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah will be fulfilled of one Africa with one currency. That is the ultimate solution because it will lower the cost of the Zimbabwean dollar. It will lower the cost of our currency. It will devalue the US dollar. So this economy is overpriced. It's overpriced because it's expressed in US dollars. So you want to devalue the US dollar, but you can't devalue the US dollar because it's not your currency. You devalue the US dollar by adopting a regional currency that is credible and legitimate. So you either go the rand way or you go the regional currency way. But of course, that will require serious discipline. On the 10th of July 2010, I had a meeting with Pravin Gordhan, then as Minister of Finance of South Africa. And I said to Pravin, why don't you transform SADC into a monetary union? He says, if we do that, we are exporting Zimbabwe's problems into the region. So that means that Zimbabwe, because it is the sick man of the region, must attempt to genuine reforms so that there is fiscal convergence. So you can't have one country, Botswana, with 7% inflation, Zimbabwe with 2,000% inflation. So there has to be both fiscal convergence and monetary convergence, which means Zimbabwe is probably 5 years away from achieving the monetary and fiscal convergence that will allow the other SADC countries, Mauritius, Seychelles, Botswana, Democratic Republic of Congo, from saying we can. Right now they look at us and just laugh at us. Look at Namibia. The other day Namibia opened its borders with Botswana. So there's no more barriers there.
You can walk across it.
But what really eyed me about that was that it was in August, by the way, August of last year. The president of Botswana, Comrade Masisi, had just spent 3 days in Zimbabwe with President Mnangagwa opening the Harare agricultural show. 2 days later, he goes and does the real stuff and opens his borders with Namibia. He couldn't touch us. Why? We are the sick men of SADC.
I couldn't help but chuckle when you said Zimbabwe is about 5 years away from these issues, and spoken like a true politician. You think in 5 year cycles, my election after every 5 years.
No. It's you see, there's a lot that needs to be done.
Yeah.
So you need confidence.
Yeah.
So you need to persuade the other countries that you are on an irreversible path to reform. You understand? I don't want to politicize. This. Let's stick to economics. But it's a leadership issue.
The point you made earlier, and I said I would come back to it, was a couple of issues. First of all, the issue of debt clearance.
Yes.
And I asked this because we seem to be making quite a lot of noise. We hear that there's a lot of momentum towards debt clearance. We've appointed a debt clearance champion. We've appointed all sorts of people to work with us, and there's a dialogue going on. I remember several years ago speaking and interviewing Honorable Chinamasa, and he was also pushing and very confident and upbeat about a Lima debt clearance plan. So clearly this issue of our debt is an albatross around the economy, but it's something that we've talked about and done in the past. Do you think that this time we'll get it right?
I don't think we'll get it right. 3 things are important. The first one is that you cannot decouple, you cannot delink economics and politics. So you cannot treat the debt question purely as an econometricity matter. You are asking the United States of America, you are asking the Paris Club of creditors who are owed $5 billion. You are essentially asking the taxpayers of France, of Germany, of the United Kingdom to cancel your debt. You can't expect them to do that if there's political conflict. You are beating up people. You can't have free and fair elections. So the starting point is that those who are naively pushing this agenda without also pushing for political reform, it will not work. The West will not open up. A week ago, Parliament passed the Patriot Bill, the Criminal Procedure and Evidence Act, with the components of the Patriot Bill. And I stood up and submitted in Parliament that, look, this bill is so terrible and it will have an effect on our debt effort, because the international community will look at you and say, but which country does that? Not even Ian Smith did that. Not even apartheid South Africa passed such a heinous piece of legislation. And this is on the back of the NGO, the PVO bill that we have passed. We last week, Parliament was adjourned to Tuesday, the 31st of May. We were supposed to debate major amendments to the Electoral Act. And there was agreement between us and between all parties that we need to reform. But that was on Tuesday. On 30th of Monday, 30th of May, Statutory Instrument 85 of 2023 was passed, which was the proclamation for elections. And once you do that, you can't have any other reforms. Yeah. So people are watching all these things. You've got the case of Job Scal. He has now spent a year in prison. You've got this case of Jacob Ngarubvume, sentenced to 4 years. So political hygiene will bring to its death the debt reform agenda in Zimbabwe. That's number one. Number two is the procedure, the process. You can't have this process outside the involvement of Parliament.
I was going to ask, outside, are you privy to...
We're not involved at all. The Budget Committee is not involved at all. The Public Accounts Committee, PAC, is not involved at all. So you can't have this process without Parliament, without civic society. It's not possible. Three, you can't have this process when you keep on exhibiting serious economic dishygiene. So when your inflation is now 7,000%, and you've got this every week, there are 3-4 policy measures that are contradicting each other. The Reserve Bank and the Ministry of Finance are at war. And I think the Reserve Bank is going to buy missiles pointed at the new government complex, blockade the office of the Minister of Finance. It won't work. Fourth complication is China. We owe China. We owe China about 2-3 billion US dollars. But China is not on the table. China is not on the table. What are on the table are your traditional debtors. So we owe 2 billion US dollars to the World Bank. We owe about 600 million to the African Development Bank. That's not a problem. Mm-hmm. Then the biggest creditor is the Paris Club of lenders. But where is China? In Zambia, there's President Hichilema has been trying to resolve the Zambian debt question, but China is proved to be the elephant in the living room, because it's not enough to negotiate with traditional debtors when you are not negotiating with the new lenders now, the Chinese, the Indians, and so forth. Number 6, elephant in the living room, is the $3.5 billion compensation to white farmers. So workers are saying, we lost 5.86 billion US dollars in the form of pensions in 2009. Savers, working people like you and me, are saying we also lost billions when there was conversion of currency in February of 2019. We are losing money now as I'm talking to you. Why are you compensating white farmers $3.5 billion
when you have not?
When you've got black people who lost money, pensions, 5.86 billion. Of course, they're also white people. When you've got black workers who lost money into, so all these things are things. What I would do myself is to have a piece of legislation that actually deals with this question of debt, that makes sure that everyone on board, every stakeholder is on board. The Chinese are on board. The Afro-Import-Exim Bank, the Afro-Exim Bank is on board because the central bank owes it about 8 billion US dollars, major creditor. Then civic society must be there, Parliament must be there, and make this process transparent. You have nothing to hide. Because after all, this debt is not fresh debt. We defaulted in 1999. So we defaulted in 1999. We have nothing to lose. This is legacy debt. Let's be transparent about it. Nigeria did it under President Obasanjo. President Obasanjo went open. Him even Yoweri Museveni is not my friend, but the model you used in dealing with debt is a model that Zimbabwe too can follow.
A listener here asking, and I think also this can bring in your legal expertise. He's saying, what does the removal of the official bank rate mean for businesses and local authority? Because business and local authority charges, since they were said to be linked to this.
So here I'll answer on the assumption that we are going to move to a purely market-based rate. Which is not the case at the present moment. At the present moment, we've got the traditional interbank rate. Then we have now the new floor rate, which started today, which today was 4,600. Then you still have the auction rate. Then you've got the paro rate. So that is a dog's breakfast. That is a dog's breakfast. It creates distortions. It creates arbitrage. It creates a rent behavior in the market. But assuming we move to an open market rate, there will be a shock in the system. There will be a shock in the system. In other words, there will be a spike in prices, but there will be stability. There will be stability. So, because we are so close to an election, the hope is that you will still be in shock up until after the election and hope that you are not dead. Then you can resuscitate after the election on the 1st of September. But the economy is going to undergo tremendous shock because there will be a rapid increase in surprises as the market opens price discovery. My fear, Mkoma Farai, is that if exporters don't bring in foreign currency, then you have a problem. Then you have a problem because it means the premium on the US dollar will continue going up. So that's my fear number one. My fear number two is the election itself, because election promises have to be monetized. So while the promises are going to be made, civil servants got literally 100% increase in March. It may come again. When you do that, the monetization of election promises means you're going to be printing more money. And you and I know what happens when you print more money. There's greater instability. There's greater macro disequilibrium. So that will increase the shock, which is why I'm saying to the Zimbabwean public, prepare and brace yourself for shock. If you don't have shock absorbers, please have them, because it's going to be a long winter of discontent.
Daniel Zengeni from Wesley, thank you for your submission. He says the problem we have is playing the blame game. No one wants to accept or take responsibility for their actions. And I think, I suppose, speaking to, we often hear that, this is happening because of A, B, and C, retailers who are overpricing, manufacturers who are diverting goods elsewhere, people are profiteering.
Let's not blame business. Let's not blame. You see, a businessman is a logical person. Everything he buys is in US dollars. So you can't expect him to levy a charge in a currency that will bring him out of business. He would rather shut down. So what is happening right now is that even where they are not charging in US dollars, they are raising the exchange rate. Last night I went into a supermarket. All the prices were indexed at 7,000. I tweeted about it, that shops have put prices at 7,000. But 7,000 is the only price that would allow them to restock. But they're just the respondents. They are responding to the macroeconomic instability created by the authorities. So the buck starts and ends with Mutuli Ngube. The buck starts and ends with the central bank.
Honorable Biti, we must thank you, but I cannot let you leave without asking you this. I mean, we don't know how much longer you'll be sitting in Parliament, but what are you doing as Zimbabweans are sitting out there and saying, Mukuti itireyo in Parliament, tibatsirikane nezva zviri kuitika izvi?
I think vanoona Parliament pa Facebook, you have seen the robust work which we have put. The work we did around the Labour Act, we removed no fault termination, so we reversed vanazuva mutemo wainge kuti mushanda angodzingwa nenotice. You know what happened with ZBC? Over 300 people were fired. So parliament is working. Parliament is working. And I want to say to this parliament is that when we are really working, bar political things like the Electoral Act, you won't know where Comrade Chinotimba comes from, where Dexter Nduna comes from. We take a united position. So I think Parliament has done an extremely decent job in mitigating some of the issues, and also things around transparency. You remember the work that we did when I was chair of the Public Accounts Committee. So it's an important place, and I hope that the electorate will vote wisely so that we put representatives that are able to fight for our issues.
Baba Ano Inchiweshe says, I'm still waiting for Honorable Biti to answer the question you asked. If the government offers him a job as a Minister of Finance, will you take it?
I can't take it. My boss is Advocate Nelson Chamisa. So I'll wait for Advocate
but
Nelson
your
Chamisa.
bosses should be Zimbabweans, should be us. So if you're saying you're going there to improve our plight,
I saw Superman once when I came. Yeah, if Advocate Nelson Chamisa gets into government, we will be working for him.
We must end the discussion here because we are out of time. I'd like to thank you, Honorable Biti, for coming through and sharing your insights. I think always very helpful to know what is happening and to have, I think, alternative ideas. I think it's good for debating and also just for coming up with better ideas, because we hope that the policymakers, the authorities have listened to this and have also seen that there are other, schools of thought that they could consider.
Thank you, Farai. Thank you so much.
And thank you to all our listeners who tuned in, and particularly those who got in touch with us. Always a great pleasure to interact and interface with you. We look forward to another edition of Ask the MP next Wednesday with me, Farai Mwakutuya. Up next is the Y Zone with Brian Sitole. I'm sure it'll be packed with content and action, so please make sure you stay tuned for that and a whole lot more. Keep it here on ZiFM Stereo, my station, your station. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.